The medical bay was quiet during the night cycle. The lights were dimmed to a soft blue, and the only sounds were the gentle beeping of machines and the whisper of recycled air moving through the vents. Duhaim lay in one of the beds, his arms wrapped in white bandages. The radiation burns were being treated with advanced medicine, but the healing would take time. His body needed rest. His mind, however, would not stop working. He stared at the ceiling and thought about nothing in particular. That was how he spent most of his quiet hours these days. Not thinking about the past. Not thinking about the future. Just existing in the present moment, counting his breaths, feeling his heart beat its slow rhythm. He heard footsteps approaching before he saw her. Vela moved quietly, but not quietly enough for the empty medical bay. She appeared at the doorway, her silver blue skin reflecting the dim lights, her large eyes fixed on him with an expression he could not read. "May I come in?" she asked. Doyin nodded. She walked to the chair beside his bed and sat down. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Vala seemed to be searching for words, her fingers twisting together in her lap. "I should thank you," she finally said, "for the breach and for the reactor. You saved the ship twice now." "The crew saved the ship," Dohyun said. "I just did my part." "You did more than your part, and you know it." He did not argue. There was no point in false modesty with someone who could feel his emotions. Vela was quiet again. Then she looked at him directly, her gaze steady and searching. "I touched your pain," she said softly, "when I grabbed your arm before you entered the reactor chamber. My senses reached into you, and I felt what was underneath. I am sorry. I did not mean to intrude. It happened before I could stop it." Dohyun's expression did not change. "I know. I felt you looking. Then you know what I found." Yes, another silence. The machines beeped their steady rhythm. Somewhere in the ship, a pipe groaned as it expanded and contracted with the changing temperatures. "Why aren't you afraid, human?" Vila asked. Her voice was barely above a whisper now. "That is what I asked you after the breach. You never answered. But I think I understand now. It is not that you are not afraid. It is that fear does not control you anymore, because you have already lost something worse than death." Do-hyun closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were looking at something far away. Something that existed only in memory. "Her name was Hannah," he said. Vela held her breath. "My daughter. She was 7 years old. The brightest child you ever met. She wanted to be a starship pilot. She made me promise to take her to space one day, to show her the stars up close." His voice was steady, but there was a weight in it that made every word feel heavy. "We were on a colony shuttle, traveling from Earth to the Mars settlements. Routine trip. Thousands of people made it every week without any problems." He paused. His bandaged hands tightened on the blanket. "The shuttle's navigation system failed. We hit a debris field. Small rocks, nothing dangerous under normal circumstances, but without the navigation system, the pilot could not avoid them. One rock punctured the hole right where the passenger section met the cargo bay." Vila felt cold. She knew what was coming, but she did not want to hear it. She wanted to stop him, to tell him he did not need to continue. But she stayed silent because she understood that he needed to say this. Maybe no one had let him say it in a long time. "I was in the back section, getting a drink from the dispensary. Hannah was in the front with her mother. The emergency bulkheads came down faster than I could move. They sealed the front section off. I could see her through the window in the door. She was looking at me. She was scared, but she was trying to smile because she did not want me to worry." His voice cracked. For the first time since Vela had known him, his mask slipped, and she saw the raw wound underneath. The front section lost atmosphere in less than 2 minutes. I watched through that window. I watched her fall asleep. Peaceful, they said later. Oxygen deprivation is peaceful if it happens fast enough. She just closed her eyes and did not open them again. Tears were falling down Vela's face now. She did not try to stop them. They were not only her tears. They were firm too. My wife died in that section as well, and 83 other people. But I survived. I was in the wrong place at the wrong moment, and that wrong place saved my life. The universe decided that I should live and they should die, and it gave me no say in the matter. Do-hyun looked at her, his dark eyes meeting her silver ones. For a long time after that, I wanted to die too. I thought about it every day. I made plans. I wrote letters. I got very close several times. He shook his head slowly. But I did not do it. And do you know why? Vela shook her head. Because dying would not bring them back. Nothing I do will ever bring them back. I can suffer or I cannot suffer, and either way, they will still be gone. That is the reality. That is the truth that broke me open and showed me what was inside. He took a breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was clearer. I realized that I had a choice. I could spend the rest of my life trying to escape my pain. I could run from it, hide from it, drown it in whatever distractions I could find. Or I could accept it. I could let it become part of me. I could carry it with me every single day and use it as a reminder. A reminder of what? That life is short. That the people around us can be gone in an instant. That every moment we have is a gift, even the painful ones. He looked at her with something like peace in his eyes. I am not afraid of death, Vela, because I have already experienced the worst thing that can happen to a person. I lost my child. I lost the future I was supposed to have. Everything after that is just extra time, borrowed time, and I choose to spend that time helping others instead of hurting myself. Vela was crying openly now. She did not care. She let the tears fall because they needed to fall. That is the saddest thing I have ever heard, she whispered. And the bravest. It is not brave, Do-hyun said softly. It is just survival. A different kind of survival than your people understand, maybe. But survival all the same. He reached out with one of his bandaged hands and touched her arm gently. It was a human gesture of comfort, and she felt the warmth of it, even through the fabric and gauze. Fear is not your enemy, he said. Fear means you have something to lose, something to protect. That is a gift. Do not throw it away because it hurts sometimes. Vela took his hand in both of hers. The gesture surprised them both, but neither pulled away. How do you keep going? She asked. How do you wake up every day knowing what you know, carrying what you carry? Do-hyun smiled. It was a small smile, tired but genuine. One step at a time, he said. One breath at a time. And when the weight gets too heavy, I remember that somewhere out there, on some other ship or some other planet, there is another person who needs help. And maybe, if I can get to them in time, I can save them from losing what I lost. He closed his eyes. That is all we can do, Vela. Help the people in front of us. Carry our pain with dignity. And keep walking until our legs give out. Vela stayed by his bed for a long time after he fell asleep. She held his hand and listened to his breathing and thought about everything he had told her. She thought about fear and pain and loss. She thought about the weight that humans carried, the impossible burden of knowing that everything they loved could be taken from them at any moment. And she thought about courage. Real courage. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of something stronger. Something that could only be forged in the fire of unimaginable loss. Kang Do-hyun was not fearless. He was full of fear. He was drowning in grief that would never fully heal. But he kept walking anyway. And that, Vela realized, was the most human thing of all. The ship was called Horizon's Edge, and it moved through the darkness of space like a small metal world carrying life inside it. The vessel belonged to no single species. It was a research ship built by many hands from many planets, and its crew came from stars scattered across the galaxy. Kan Do-yoon worked in the lower engineering section. He was 32 years old, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and hands that knew every pipe and wire in the ship's belly. The other engineers called him quiet. Some called him strange. He rarely smiled, rarely laughed, but his work was perfect. That was enough for most of them. On this day, Do-yoon was alone in the maintenance corridor, checking a coolant line that had been making unusual sounds. The lights above him flickered in their pale blue rhythm. The ship hummed its endless song of power and motion. Everything seemed normal, but space does not care about normal. The asteroid came from nowhere. It was small, no larger than a ground transport vehicle, but it was moving fast. The ship's sensors detected it too late. The collision happened in the lower starboard section, exactly where Do-yoon was working. The sound was terrible. Metal screamed as it tore. The floor beneath Do-yoon's feet shook hard enough to throw him against the wall. Red emergency lights began flashing immediately, painting everything in blood colors. Then came the worst sound of all, the high whistling cry of atmosphere escaping into the void. Do-yoon pushed himself up from the floor. His ears were ringing. A cut on his forehead was dripping blood into his eye, but he ignored it. He looked down the corridor and saw the breach. A hole in the outer wall the size of a dinner table, and beyond it, nothing but stars and endless black. The emergency bulkheads were already closing. Do-yoon knew he had seconds to make a choice. He could run for the bulkhead behind him and escape to the safe section of the ship. Or he could stay and try to seal the breach. He stayed down as he moved toward the damaged section. He heard a voice crying out. It was high and filled with terror. Do-yoon turned and saw her, a Lunari officer pressed against the wall, her silver blue skin flickering with patterns of distress. Her name was Vela. He had seen her before in the corridors, always walking with her back straight and her chin high. She was important somehow, a high-ranking officer from a species known for their great minds and their great fears. Right now, she looked like a creature about to die of terror. The Lunari were empaths. They felt emotions more deeply than most species, including their own emotions. Fear was not just a feeling for them. It was a physical force that could freeze their bodies and stop their thoughts. Vela was experiencing this now. Her legs would not move. Her hands shook against the wall. Her eyes were wide and fixed on the hole that was pulling their air away. Do-yoon grabbed her arm. She flinched as if he had burned her. "Look at me," he said. His voice was calm. Not loud, not commanding. Just calm. "Look at my face." Not the breach. "My face." Vela's eyes moved to him. Her breathing was too fast. She was going to pass out if she did not slow down. "We are going to fix this," Do-yoon said. "But I need your help. Can you hand me tools when I ask for them?" She did not answer. Her body was shaking. "Vela," he said her name clearly. "I need you to nod if you understand me." Slowly, she nodded. "Good. Stay close to me." Do-yoon moved to the emergency supply cabinet on the wall. He pulled it open and grabbed the breach sealing kit. It was a temporary solution, a special foam that would harden in the cold of space and create a seal until proper repairs could be made. But applying it meant getting close to the breach. Very close. The pull of the vacuum was strong. Do-yoon could feel it trying to drag him forward, trying to take everything in the corridor and throw it into the stars. Small objects were already flying past him. A datapad. A loose tool. A piece of broken metal. He walked toward the breach anyway. Vela watched him move. She could not understand what she was seeing. Her empathic abilities let her sense the emotions of others, especially when those emotions were strong. When someone was afraid, she felt it like heat from a fire. When someone was panicking, it was like a storm inside her own mind. But the human walking toward death was quiet inside. His heart was beating at a normal pace. His mind was focused and clear. There was no panic, no screaming fear. He was looking at the endless void of space, at the thing that killed all living things. And his emotions were as still as water and a glass dot. It was impossible. It was wrong. It made no sense. Do-hyun reached the edge of the breach. The cold was already biting at his skin. His breath was becoming harder to pull into his lungs as the air thinned. He could feel the vacuum trying to take him, pulling at his clothes, at his body, at his life. He began applying the foam. "Hand me the stabilizer rod," he said over his shoulder. Vila forced her legs to move. She grabbed the rod from the kit and brought it to him. Her hands were still shaking, but she did it. She did it because his calm was like a wall she could hide behind. Do-hyun used the rod to spread the foam across the breach. The foam began hardening immediately, turning from white to gray as it met the cold. The pull of the vacuum grew weaker. The screaming of escaping air grew quieter, but the breach was larger than the first layer could cover. Do-hyun applied more foam. His hands were now pressed against the frozen metal of the ship's hull. The cold burned into his palms like fire. He could feel his skin sticking to the metal, could feel the pain climbing up his arms, but he did not pull away. The foam hardened. The seal held. The whistling stopped. Silence fell over the corridor, broken only by the sound of their breathing. Do-hyun stepped back from the breach and looked at his hands. The skin was red and damaged, burned by the cold. He would need medical treatment. But they were alive. He turned to check on Vela. She was still standing where he had left her, her silver blue skin now pale. Her eyes fixed on him with an expression he could not read. "The seal is temporary," Do-hyun said. "The repair team will need to make it permanent. But we are safe for now." Vila did not respond. She was still staring at him, her chest rising and falling with each breath. Her mind was trying to process what had just happened, what she had just witnessed. She had watched him walk toward death. She had felt the void reaching for him, hungry and endless. And he had not been afraid. His heart had not raced. His hands had not shaken. He had simply done what needed to be done, as if death was just another problem to solve. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. Your heartbeat never changed. Do-hyun looked at her. He did not understand why that mattered. Why aren't you afraid, human? She asked. The question came from somewhere deep inside her, from a place of genuine confusion and growing wonder. I could feel the void. I could feel death waiting right there. How did you just walk toward it? Do-hyun was quiet for a long moment. He looked at his burned hands, then at the sealed breach, then at the Lunari officer who was looking at him, like he was something she had never seen before. He did not answer her question. Instead, he walked past her toward the emergency communication panel on the wall. He activated it and reported the breach to the bridge. He gave them his location, the status of the seal, and the need for a repair team. His voice was the same as it had been the whole time, calm, steady, and completely without fear. Vela watched him, and a new feeling grew inside her. It was not fear. It was not relief. It was something else, something that felt like the beginning of a question that would take a long time to answer. She had spent her whole life among her own people, who understood fear the way they understood breathing. She had studied other species, had learned their ways and their weaknesses. She thought she understood the galaxy, but she did not understand this human. And standing in that corridor, with the cold still biting at her skin and the taste of terror still in her mouth, she realized she wanted to. She needed to, because if a creature could look at death and feel nothing, then either they were broken beyond repair, or they knew something that everyone else did not. Either way, Vila had to find out which one it was. The Horizon's Edge reached the Lunari starbase 12 days after the reactor incident. It came into dock slowly, its wounded hull catching the light of the distant sun, its crew tired but alive. Repair ships flew out to meet it like small fish greeting a whale. Do-hyun was scheduled to transfer to a medical facility on the station for advanced treatment. The radiation burns on his arms had healed some, but there was deeper damage that needed careful attention. He would be leaving the ship. He might not come back. Before the transfer, Vala requested a formal meeting with Commander Aris. Aris was old by Lunari standards. His silver-blue skin faded to a pale gray, his eyes carrying the weight of centuries. He had spent most of his life studying other species, trying to understand the galaxy and all the strange creatures living in it. He was considered wise. He was considered fair. He was considered someone worth listening to. Vila stood before him in his private chamber, her back straight, her hands folded in front of her. She had prepared what she wanted to say, but now that the moment was here, the words felt too small for the truth she was trying to explain. "You requested this meeting," Aris said. His voice was calm and curious. "You said you had something important to share. Something about the humans." "Yes, Commander. We have studied humans for many centuries. We have gathered data, conducted interviews, analyzed their biology and psychology. What could you have learned in a few weeks that we have not already discovered?" Vela took a breath. "Respect, Commander. I learned respect." Aris raised an eyebrow. The gesture was slight, but Vela knew him well enough to recognize it as surprise. "Explain." "When I first came aboard the Horizon's Edge, I believed what most of our people believe about humans. That they are reckless, dangerous, unstable. That they come from a death world and carry the violence of that world inside them. That they are creatures to be watched carefully and trusted cautiously." Aris nodded. "These were common views among the Lunari. But I was wrong," Vela continued. "We have been wrong about them for a very long time." She told him everything. She told him about the breach, about watching Do-hyun walk toward the void without his heartbeat changing. She told him about her conversation with Yuna, about learning that humans were not fearless, but full of fear. She told him about the reactor, about sensing the ocean of grief beneath Do-hyun's calm surface. And she told him about the conversation in the medical bay, about Hannah and the shuttle, and the choice Do-hyun had made to keep living, even when living hurt more than dying ever could. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Aris was staring at her with an expression she had never seen on his ancient face. "You're saying that their courage comes from their pain," he said slowly. "Yes, but it is more than that." Vila stepped forward, her voice growing stronger. "We have always thought that fear was a weakness in other species. We believed that the best way to survive was to listen to fear, to let it guide us away from danger. And for us, that is true. Fear has protected us. Fear has helped us build our civilization." She shook her head. "But humans cannot do that. Their world would not let them. Fear was not an escape route for them. It was a constant companion. They evolved not to avoid fear, but to function inside it. To carry it with them always and keep moving anyway. That sounds like madness." "No, Commander. That is strength. A different kind of strength than we have ever understood." Vila's voice was filled with emotion now. "They are not Deathworlders because they do not fear death. They are Deathworlders because they have already looked death in the eye, over and over, generation after generation, and decided that death is not the worst thing they can imagine." Aris leaned forward. "What is the worst thing they can imagine? Living without purpose. Giving up. Letting the people they love down." Vila thought of Do-yun, of his tired smile, of the weight he carried so quietly. They would rather walk into fire than abandon someone who needs them. They would rather feel pain than feel nothing at all. The commander was quiet for a long time. His old eyes were distant, processing what he had heard. "This changes things," he finally said. "If what you say is true, then we have misunderstood them completely. We have treated them like dangerous animals when we should have treated them like wounded warriors." "Yes, and we are not the only ones. Every species in the galaxy looks at humans and sees something terrifying. But what we are actually seeing is something beautiful. Something that most of us could never be. What is that?" Vela smiled, and there were tears in her eyes. "Unbreakable. They are unbreakable, Commander. Not because they cannot be broken, but because they keep putting themselves back together, no matter how many times they fall apart." The meeting ended shortly after that. Oris promised to include Vela's observations in the official record, to share them with the Council, to begin changing how the Lunari thought about their human allies. It was a small step. But small steps could lead to long journeys. Vela made her way to the docking bay, where Do-yun was waiting for his transport. She found him standing by a window, looking out at the starbase and the ships moving around it. His bag was at his feet. His arms were still bandaged. He looked peaceful. He turned when he heard her approach. "Vela," he said, "I was wondering if I would see you before I left. I could not let you go without saying goodbye." He smiled, that small, tired smile of his. "It is not goodbye forever. The galaxy is smaller than it looks. We will probably cross paths again." Vela walked closer until she was standing beside him at the window. They looked out at the stars together. Two people from different worlds who had found something unexpected in each other. "I spoke to Commander Oris," she said. "I told him what I learned from you. About humans, about fear, about courage." Do-han raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like a serious conversation." It was, but it was necessary. She turned to face him. "Your species deserves to be understood. Not feared. Not avoided. Understood." He looked at her, and something softened in his eyes. "Most people do not want to understand us. It is easier to keep their distance. I know, but I am not most people. Not anymore." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Vela raised her hand, palm facing outward. It was a Lunari gesture of deep respect, usually reserved for family or heroes. Do-yun recognized it. He raised his own bandaged hand and pressed it gently against hers. "Thank you," Vela said, "for teaching me what courage actually means. You taught yourself. I just gave you some pieces to work with." She shook her head. "You gave me more than pieces. You gave me a reason to be braver than I thought I could be." The transport shuttle's arrival was announced over the station speakers. Do-yun picked up his bag and turned toward the boarding gate. "Take care of yourself, Vela," he said. "And do not be afraid to be afraid. Fear means you have something worth protecting. Just do not let it stop you." "I will not," she promised. "Not anymore." He walked toward the shuttle, his steps slow but steady. Val watched him until he reached the gate, until the doors opened and swallowed him up. Then she watched the shuttle lift off and pull away from the station. She watched until its lights became just another star among millions, but she did not feel sad. She felt something else entirely. She felt hope, because if a single broken human could carry so much pain and still choose to help others, then maybe there was hope for everyone. Maybe the galaxy was not as cold and uncaring as it seemed. Maybe the darkness between the stars was not as empty as it looked. Maybe all it took was one person willing to keep walking. No matter how much it hurt, Vila turned away from the window and walked back into the station. She had work to do. Reports to file. People to talk to. A whole new understanding to spread. And for the first time in her life, she was not afraid of what came next. She was ready. Because somewhere out there, among the countless stars and endless void, there were humans, carrying their impossible weight, feeling their endless fear, and walking forward anyway. And if they could do it, so could she. So could anyone. That was the truth Kang Do-yoon had taught her. That was the gift he had given without even knowing it. Courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was the decision to keep moving, one step at a time, until the darkness finally gave way to light. And Vila intended to keep moving for a very long time. A week passed after the breach. The ship was repaired. The crew settled back into their routines. Everything seemed normal again, like the universe had decided to give them a moment to breathe. The universe lied. The alarm came in the middle of the night cycle, when the corridors were dim and most of the crew was sleeping. It was not the harsh scream of a hull breach this time. It was a deeper sound, a low pulsing tone that every spacefarer knew and feared. Reactor warning. Vila was in her quarters when she heard it. She was out of bed and dressed in seconds, her training taking over before her mind could catch up. She ran to the engineering section, where a crowd was already forming outside the main reactor chamber. The news was bad. The asteroid impact had done more damage than anyone realized. A crack had formed in one of the reactor's cooling systems, invisible to the scanners, slowly growing worse with each passing day. Now, the crack had become a rupture. Coolant was leaking. Temperature was rising. And if someone did not go in there and fix it manually, the reactor would melt down within hours. A meltdown would not just kill the crew. It would turn the ship into a small star, burning everything inside to ash. Chief Engineer Rock, a Lunari with gray skin and tired eyes, stood at the door to the reactor chamber and explained the situation to the gathered crew. His voice was calm, but Vila could sense the fear beneath it. Everyone could. The chamber is flooded with radiation, Rock said. Our suits can protect us from some of it, but not all. Anyone who goes in there will be exposed. The repairs will take at least 30 minutes. That is a long time to spend in a radiation bath. The crew was silent. Vila looked around and saw faces filled with fear. The Lunari, the Veloth, the Saren, all of them standing still, their bodies refusing to move toward the danger that waited behind that door. Going in, there was not certain death, but it was certain pain, certain damage, the kind of harm that could not be undone. I need volunteers, Rock said. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. No one stepped forward. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. Vela felt it pressing down on her, felt the weight of what was happening. They were all going to die because no one could make themselves walk into that room. Fear had frozen them all. Then a voice spoke from the back of the crowd. I'll go. Everyone turned. Kang Do-yoon walked forward, pushing gently through the gathered crew. He was wearing his work clothes, stained with grease, his hair messy from sleep. He looked like he had just woken up. He looked like he was about to do nothing more important than check a broken pipe. Do-yoon, Rock said. The radiation in there is serious. Even with a suit, you will be exposed. The damage to your body could be permanent. I understand. The burns from the breach have not fully healed. Your hands are still recovering. I know. Then why? Rock's voice was confused, almost frustrated. Why would you volunteer for this? Do-yoon looked at him, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Something old. Something tired. Because someone has to, he said simply. And I can. He walked to the supply locker and began pulling on a radiation suit. The crew watched him in silence. Vale watched him too, and something twisted in her chest. She did not know what it was. It felt like pain, but it was not her own. Without thinking, she pushed through the crowd and caught his arm before he could enter the chamber. Her empathic senses flared open, reaching for him, trying to understand what was driving him to do this. What she found made her gasp up beneath the calm surface. Beneath the steady heartbeat and quiet mind, there was an ocean of grief. It was vast and dark and endless, like space itself. It was the kind of pain that did not fade with time, the kind that became part of you, woven into everything you were. And at the center of that ocean, there was a wound. A single terrible wound that had never healed. "You are not unafraid," Vela whispered. Her voice shook. "You are in pain. So much pain." Do-hyun looked at her. His expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. A wall came down, just for a moment, and she saw him clearly. She saw the man behind the mask. "Everyone is in pain," he said quietly. "That is not an excuse to stop." He gently removed her hand from his arm. Then he turned and walked into the reactor chamber. The door sealed behind him with a heavy sound. Through the small window, Vala could see him moving through the radiation-filled room, his figure outlined by warning lights and steam. She pressed her hand against the glass and watched, and for the first time in her life, she prayed. The minutes crawled by like hours. The crowd waited in silence, listening to the crackle of Do-hyun's voice over the communication system as he reported his progress. He was calm the entire time. His voice never wavered. He gave updates like he was reading from a manual. Coolant line located. Beginning repairs. Seal applied to primary rupture. Moving to secondary damage. Temperature dropping. Pressure stabilizing. 32 minutes. That was how long he stayed in there. 32 minutes of walking through poison, breathing filtered air that was not clean enough, feeling radiation burning into his cells with every step. When the door finally opened, he walked out slowly. The crowd parted for him like he was something holy. Vela could see the red marks already forming on his exposed skin, the places where the suit had failed to protect him. His arms were the worst, covered in burns that looked like sunlight had been pressed into his flesh. But he was smiling. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it was real. He was alive. The ship was safe. That was enough for him. Hyuna pushed through the crowd and grabbed his arm. "Medical bay. Now, do not argue with me." "I was not going to argue," Do-hyun said. His voice was tired. "I could use some rest." Yuna led him away, and the crowd began to break apart. People were talking now, their voices mixing together in relief and confusion. The reactor was stable. The crisis was over. They were going to live. But Vela did not move. She stood by the reactor door, her hand still pressed against the glass, her mind full of what she had sensed in him. She had touched his pain. She had felt the shape of it, the weight of it. It was not like normal grief. It was something deeper, something that had changed him at a fundamental level, and she understood now why he had volunteered. It was not bravery. It was not a desire for death. It was something stranger and sadder. He had already lost everything that mattered to him. The things that most people feared, pain, damage, even death, those things did not scare him anymore. Not because he was strong, but because he had been broken so completely that there was nothing left to break. And yet, he kept moving. He kept helping. He kept walking into danger to save others, not because he wanted to die, but because helping others was the only thing that gave his life meaning anymore. Vela thought about her own fears. She thought about the terror she had felt during the breach, the way her body had refused to move, the way her mind had shut down in the face of death. She had always thought fear was her greatest weakness. But now she wondered if the real weakness was not having something worth facing fear for. Do-hyun had found that thing. He had found a reason to keep moving, even when every step hurt. He had learned to use his pain instead of drowning in it. and standing there in the corridor, watching the lights flash their all-clear signal, Vela made a decision. She would learn his story. She would understand what had broken him and how he had put himself back together. Not because she wanted to satisfy her curiosity, but because she wanted to learn how to be that strong. She wanted to learn how to walk through fire and come out the other side. Still standing, the ship hummed around her. Alive and safe because of one man's willingness to suffer. And somewhere in the medical bay, that man was probably already falling asleep. His burned arms wrapped in bandages, his tired heart still beating its steady rhythm. Vela would wait until he was ready. And then she would ask him the question that had been growing in her mind. Since the moment she first saw him face the void, she would ask him what had happened. What had hurt him so badly, and how he had learned to turn pain into purpose. Because if she could understand that, maybe she could understand what it truly meant to be brave. The days after the breach were filled with noise and movement. Repair teams worked in the damaged section, their tools screaming against metal as they made the temporary seal permanent. The ship's captain gave speeches about safety and courage. Everyone talked about what had happened and how close they had come to disaster. Everyone except Do-hyun. He went to the medical bay, had his burned hands treated, and returned to work the next day as if nothing had changed. The doctors told him to rest. He thanked them politely and ignored their advice. Vela could not stop watching him. She found herself looking for him in corridors, in the meal hall, in the common areas where crew members gathered during their free hours. She was not following him exactly. She was just noticing him, noticing how he moves through the ship like a ghost, present but somehow separate from everything around him. The other aliens on the ship seemed to feel the same way about the humans. Vela began paying attention to this too. During mealtimes, the humans sat together at their own tables. Not because anyone told them to, but because the other species seemed uncomfortable near them. There was always a small gap, a little distance that no one talked about but everyone maintained. One evening, Vela heard two Lunari engineers talking in quiet voices near the observation deck. "I passed by the human quarters last night," one of them said. "I could feel their dreams from the corridor. They dream of violence, of death, of things hunting them and things they have hunted." "Deathworlders," the other replied, using the word like it was something dirty. "They come from a planet that tried to kill them every day. Is it any wonder they are the way they are? But how do they function? How do they live with all that inside them?" Neither of them had an answer. Vela walked away from that conversation with more questions than before. She wanted to understand, but she did not know who to ask. Going to Do-hyun directly felt wrong somehow. He had already shown her something private, something vulnerable, and she did not want to push too hard. Instead, she found the other human on the ship, a woman named Yuna, who worked in the medical bay. She was younger than Do-hyun, with a round face and kind eyes that seemed to smile even when her mouth did not. The other crew members liked her. She was easier to be around than most humans, warm where they were cold, soft where they were hard. Vela approached her one afternoon in the medical bay. Yuna was organizing supplies, her hands moving quickly through boxes of medicine and equipment. "May I speak with you?" Vela asked Dawn, while Yuna looked up and smiled. "Of course. Is something wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" "No, I am healthy. I wanted to ask you something about humans." Yuna's smile changed, becoming smaller and more careful. "That's a big topic. What do you want to know?" Vela thought about how to say it. She had been thinking about this conversation for days, but now that she was here, the words felt clumsy in her mouth. "The breach," she finally said. "I was there with your crew member, Kang Do-hyun. I watched him seal the hole with his bare hands. I watched him walk toward the vacuum like it was nothing." "I heard about that," Yuna said. "He's stubborn. Good at his job, but stubborn. That is not what I mean." Vela shook her head. "I am an empath. I can feel the emotions of others. When I was standing in that corridor, watching death try to take us both, I felt my own fear so strongly I could not move. But when I reached for his emotions, there was nothing. No fear. No panic. His heart was calm. His mind was quiet. Yuna was silent for a moment. Then she let out a small breath, almost like a laugh, but not quite. You want to know why he was not afraid? Yes. How is that possible? How can any living creature face death and feel nothing? Yuna put down the box she was holding. She leaned against the counter and looked at Vila with an expression that was hard to read. Sad, maybe, or tired, or both. He was afraid, Yuna said. Trust me, he was terrified. Vila frowned. That is not what I sensed. That is because you do not understand what fear looks like for us. Yuna crossed her arms. For your people, fear is a signal. It tells you to run, to hide, to survive by getting away from the danger. When you feel fear, your body listens. It obeys. Yes, that is how it works. For humans, it is different. Yuna's voice was gentle, like she was explaining something to a child. We feel fear just as strongly as you do. Maybe even more strongly. Our planet was a nightmare. Everything on Earth wanted to kill us. The animals wanted to eat us. The weather wanted to drown us or freeze us or burn us alive. The diseases wanted to rot us from the inside. Even the ground itself would shake and swallow whole cities. Vila listened, her silver-blue skin flickering with unease. We learned early that running was not always an option, Yuna continued. Sometimes the danger was everywhere. Sometimes there was nowhere safe to go. So we learned to do something else instead. We learned to function inside the fear, to carry it with us like a weight we never put down. I do not understand. Think of it like this. Yuna held up her hand. Imagine you are holding a heavy stone. A Lunari would put the stone down because it hurts to hold. But a human cannot put it down. The stone is always there, always heavy, always hurting. So instead of trying to escape the pain, we learn to walk with it, to work with it, to live our entire lives while carrying something that should crush us. Vila was quiet. She was trying to imagine what that would feel like, but her mind could not grasp it. Daham was afraid in that corridor, Yuna said softly. His fear was screaming inside him just like yours was screaming inside you. But he has spent his whole life learning to keep walking no matter how loud the screaming gets. That is what you sensed, not the absence of fear. The presence of something stronger. What is stronger than fear? Yuna smiled, but it was a sad smile. Purpose, duty, stubbornness, the simple refusal to stop moving just because something hurts. She paused. And sometimes, honestly, it is just exhaustion. Sometimes you are so tired of being afraid that you stop letting it control you. Not because you are brave, but because you do not have the energy to panic anymore. Vila thought about this for a long time. She thought about her own people, who had built great civilizations by avoiding danger, by listening to their fear and letting it guide them to safety. It had worked for them. They were alive. They were successful. But humans were different. Humans had built their civilization by walking into danger over and over again, by fighting the things that scared them instead of running from them, by treating fear as a companion rather than a master. Your species, Vela said slowly, you are not fearless at all. No, we are full of fear. We are drowning in it. Then, why do the other species call you dangerous? Why do they keep their distance from you? Yuna's smile faded. She looked at Vela with eyes that seemed much older than her face. Because fear makes most creatures predictable. When you are afraid, you run. When you are terrified, you freeze. Your enemies know this. They can use it against you. She paused. But humans do not become predictable when we are afraid. We become unpredictable. We do things that make no sense to anyone watching. We charge into battle when we should retreat. We sacrifice ourselves when we should survive. We laugh in the face of death because crying takes too much energy. That is terrifying. Yes, yes, it is. Yuna nodded. And that is why the other species do not trust us. They look at us and they see creatures who do not follow the rules that every other living thing follows. They see something broken, something wrong. Vila remembered the engineers she had overheard. Deathworlders, they had called the humans. Like it was a disease. Is that what you are? She asked. Broken? Yuna was quiet for a moment. Then she shook her head. No, we are not broken. We are just shaped differently. We were made by a world that did not want us to exist, and we exist anyway. We carry more weight than anyone should have to carry, and we keep walking anyway. She looked at Vila with something like pride. That is not a flaw. That is what makes us human. Vila left the medical bay with her mind full of new thoughts. She walked through the ship's corridors, past the observation deck, past the mess hall where the humans sat at their separate tables. She looked at them differently now. She saw the way they laughed together, the way they touched each other's shoulders, the way they seemed to find light in the darkness that surrounded them. They were not monsters. They were not broken. They were survivors of a war that had never ended, carrying wounds that would never heal, and somehow still finding reasons to smile. Vala did not understand them yet, but she was beginning to. And somewhere deep inside her, in the place where her fear usually lived, she felt something new growing. It felt like respect